For those of you joining over on YouTube, this is going to be a recording of my live. I'm going live over on TikTok, and I'm going to talk about the election, things like that, trying to work through how everything worked out the way it did. So we are going live over on TikTok now, waiting for people to come in. And as we're waiting, this was not the outcome I expected. I expected to see a much bigger wave of blue support. And the Democrats let Kamala Harris down by a large margin. I'm curious to see what happened, how things worked out, and why we are short so many votes. And I don't mean short as in there's any foul play or anything like that. I haven't seen any evidence saying anybody cheated. I'm saying a whole bunch of people didn't vote. We're talking, as you're just joining us, we are talking about the election, kind of wrapping things up, talking about what we can expect going forward, what we can do going forward, and just trying to understand exactly how this election turned out the way it did. Just don't understand how Kamala Harris got about 15 million votes fewer than Joe Biden did in 2020. It just doesn't add up. Donald Trump had about the same amount of support in the election that he had in 2020. He got about the same amount of voters, period. So those of you that are joining, we are talking the election. Just kind of recapping, trying to figure out exactly how things went the way they did, etc. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments. I'll try to address them as they come through. I was not expecting the results we did. I was expecting a much higher turnout for Kamala Harris. I fully expected her to win by 10 million plus votes and a bigger electoral count margin than what Joe Biden got. And I admit I was wrong. And it's not that Donald Trump did better than Kamala Harris. I know the Trump supporters will come out and say, look at how good he did. Donald Trump got about the same amount of support as he did in 2020. He didn't gain votes, at least not for any of the numbers I'm seeing. Donald Trump's support stayed about the exact same. He didn't gain anywhere. Kamala Harris just way underperformed Joe Biden in the 2020 election. And that's all it is. The Democrats did not turn out for one reason or another to support Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. Now, I haven't done too much of a dive into the House and Senate races and stuff to see how those votes match up. Normally, people, if they are not voting for one of the races, they will vote president and skip the rest. And I haven't looked to see if it was the other way around. Yeah, you are getting blocked. I don't deal with Trump supporters and people saying it was rigged in 2020. It's just not worth it. Nope. Not dealing with you either. That's my question, Jeff. How can you lose 20 million votes? Democrats didn't show up. They didn't show up to vote for Kamala Harris. If they showed up, that she would have won. But you're going to see, and I think it's going to come out in the upcoming days, that there were protest votes where they did not vote for Kamala Harris on purpose. Whether or not it was because of the Israel-Hamas war, there's a bunch of people pissed because that's still going on and they're not dealing with that. Whether it was protests over the Ukraine-Russia war, because that's still going on. And some people are mad and pissed because of how whatever happened with Joe Biden, because Joe Biden stepped aside and let Kamala Harris run. I think some people protested and didn't vote for Kamala Harris either because they were mad about how the Democrats treated Joe Biden, or that they were mad that there wasn't a primary, that it all happened so fast and she was appointed. It doesn't add up. It's about 15, 16 million votes different that where the Democrats did not show up for Kamala Harris. Donald Trump got the same number of votes roughly that he got in the last election in 2020. His support really didn't change. He's within about 500,000 votes either way. So that didn't change. The Democrats did not show up. That's the result. And how they can not show up by that many votes when she had record fundraising, record numbers of support, and an amazing ground game. She ran one of the best campaigns that has been ran ever. Yeah, exactly. When Romney ran, when they protested him, they didn't lose 20 million votes. I don't remember the exact numbers from what would have been 2012. It's a long time ago. My brain don't work that far. I haven't seen those numbers updated in a while. But that's the point. And if I could accept this outcome. I've been saying it to different people all day. I could accept the fact that she lost if those votes would have gone to Donald Trump. Like if he would have picked up 14 million votes, okay. This just tells me that they didn't vote for her. And they chose specifically not to. And Don, you are right. When Republicans got what they want, and they better own what he does next. I don't know what to expect next. Steve Bannon was on the War Room podcast today, and he said he admitted Project 2025 is going to be the Trump agenda. They are going to try to get it done, and they are going to get what they wanted. But I don't know how much of it's going to actually work. We are going to have. They haven't called the House yet. There's a chance Democrats take the House. If they take the House, there's not going to be a lot that they're going to be able to get done through Congress. And the rest of it, we are going to have to hope that the courts hold. That the courts block a bunch of the illegal, unconstitutional stuff that is in Project 2025. It's going to be hard for them to go ahead and just gut some of these these government agencies. They want to get rid of the Department of Education. They want to get rid of the National Weather Service, things like that. They are not just going to be able to do that with an executive order. That's going to need to go through Congress. And I think even with Republicans gaining more support, some of this stuff is not going to make it through Congress. Republicans didn't back his border wall when he was president the last time. He had to do a bunch of sketchy stuff to even get funding for his wall. So we'll see how much the Republicans even back some of his plays, and if he's going to be president even all 4 years. His health isn't great. We've seen him having some very serious mental issues where he stumbles over words, forgets where he is. He calls it the weave, where he's twisting stories together. Just blocking some people here. Nope, not dealing with these. And if I get too many Trump supporters, I will end the live. Wish I had a moderator, but I don't. So, yeah. We're going to see how much the Republicans actually support Donald Trump when he is president, how much of his agenda they end up trying to pass through the House. And if Democrats have the House, not a lot's going to get done. It's just not. Democrats are going to have to block whatever they can through the House. We're going to have to hope the courts hold, and that they get, that they block all the unconstitutional stuff, all the illegal stuff that they want to do, starting with the mass deportations. And we don't know exactly how well or how these deportations are going to go, how they're going to determine it, and it's probably going to be a mess. It's probably not going to work, but that might be where they start. RFK Jr. wants to go in and gut the FDA. I don't know how much of that they can do without congressional support. And even with congressional support, it's not going to be easy for them to just gut the FDA. But it's entirely possible. And that's very, very dangerous. I would not want somebody like RFK Jr. anywhere close to the FDA. And I think at best this lasts 2 to 4 years. Midterms, I think we have to focus on the midterms at this point, doing what we can, focusing on vulnerable seats in the House and the Senate, getting good candidates out there, and finding out where these chances are, like where we can make changes and make gains in the House and in the Senate to help block anything that Donald Trump wants to do. It's not going to be pretty, but it also isn't going to be nearly as bad as what they want. The president doesn't have as much power as people think. There are a lot of checks and balances and norms, and a lot of things that they are going to have to go through Congress to get done. And I just don't know how much of this crazy stuff that they are going to be able to get even Republicans in Congress to agree to. And if they do, people are going to see how bad it is. Midterms are going to come around. And we will probably have Democrats gaining power in Congress in the midterms. I want to say I believe it. I know I said I believe that Kamala Harris was going to win this election. And if Democrats had shown up, she would have. She underperformed Joe Biden by about 15 million votes. Donald Trump really didn't gain any new voters. He didn't. That's the truth of the matter is Donald Trump did not gain any support in this election. If you look at his voting totals, it's about where he was in 2020, within about 500,000 votes one way or the other. Kamala Harris underperformed Joe Biden by 15 million votes. Democrats did not show up. That's the truth of it. If those votes had switched, it would have been much easier to accept, but they didn't. That's the ultimate thing there. They did not just switch and go to Donald Trump. They did not vote for the top of the ticket. I haven't seen any comparisons, comparing the number of people that voted in all the House races, comparing that to presidential race, to see if it was plus or minus votes, as if how many people voted, for the president in every state versus that voted for their down ballot races. And I kind of want to see what that comparison looks like, but I haven't seen anybody who has done that as of yet. Wood Guy, I have not heard that the House has been called red yet. It's leaning that way, but there's still a lot of seats out there yet. Last I saw was 205 Republican to 180 something Democrat, with each side getting one pickup. So we'll see how that shakes out. It is entirely possible that the House does flip. And if it doesn't, it's going to be such a narrow margin. They are not going to be getting anything done through the House just because their own people aren't going to be all on the same page. Look what happened this time. They had the House for the last 2 years and they could barely pass anything because they couldn't come to an agreement on their own on anything. And the things they did pass were so extreme that the Senate buried it and the Senate didn't take it up. And the Senate's, unless they change the rules and gut the filibuster, the Senate's going to be blocking a bunch of the crazy stuff too because of the filibuster. Now, could the Republicans get rid of the filibuster? They could, but I don't think they will, because the next set of elections in 2 years, they have a lot more Republican seats up for grabs than they do Democratic seats, and they're not going to want to risk Democrats getting power with no filibuster. Crazy stuff like what? Well, like they were trying to. Trying to remember what some of those were that just died in the Senate. Like some of their funding bills where they wanted to pass the only citizens can vote stuff where you had to prove your citizenship with a month to go in the election. That died in the Senate. It wouldn't pass. If they tried passing again, I think it would still die in the Senate unless they got the filibuster. And the filibuster is going to end up being one of the things that the Democrats are going to probably have to use a lot of unless Republicans get rid of it. And it's entirely possible. Wood guy, you're a dumb fuck. You're out of here. As far as whether or not only citizens being able to vote, that's already a thing. Non-citizens don't vote. Only people who vote for Donald Trump believe non-citizens are voting in any amount of numbers that they affect the election. It's not a thing that happens. It was just a talking point to get people riled up and voting for Donald Trump. That's all it was. But the filibuster is going to be what saves the Democrats in the Senate. They're going to be using it to block a lot of legislation, unless it gets gutted by Republicans. But I just don't see Republicans gutting the filibuster because they know it's going to be used against them if they ever lose power in the Senate. Now, I am curious to see who ends up being Senate Majority Leader. It's not going to be Mitch McConnell. He's already said he's stepping out. Will not be part of the Senate leadership. So we'll see who ends up as Senate Majority Leader, because it looks like they're getting the Senate. And we'll have to see what happens in the House. But this election, none of it makes sense, other than Democrats didn't show up for Kamala Harris. Now, was it because she's a woman? Maybe. Was it because she got appointed effectively by Joe Biden because he said, I endorse her, and went ahead and she became the nominee after his endorsement when he stepped aside, after he was pushed aside by his own party. Ultimately, it was his choice to step aside. Oh, good to know. Getting flagged already. But ultimately, it was Joe Biden's choice to step aside, but his party pushed him aside. He had a bad debate. It looked bad. And instead of rallying behind him, they said, no, you got to step aside, you got to step aside. And the media kept covering it for 3 weeks. 3 weeks or more. They kept saying, is Joe Biden going to step aside? He'd say, I'm not going anywhere. They come back and say, is Joe Biden going to step aside? He'd say, I'm not going anywhere. They keep going for 3 weeks. Finally, he said, okay, I'm stepping aside. This is what you all want, so I'm going to step aside. And he said, well, if I'm stepping aside, I'm going to endorse Kamala Harris. And she would, if Joe Biden hadn't stepped aside but instead died, then she would have been the nominee anyway. She made sense as the nominee, but the Democrats let her down. And, I don't know if it was all protest votes because of the way she became the nominee, or if it was all because they were mad because of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the Ukrainian conflict, or what the case was. But the Democrats let Kamala Harris down because they did not vote for Donald Trump. They just didn't vote for her. And they didn't go to third party. If you look at the third party vote, they are way down from 2020. Kamala Harris should have won this race by 10 million plus. And she's 15 million votes under what Joe Biden had in 2020. Democrats failed Kamala Harris this time. It doesn't make any sense. I haven't figured out what the reason is. But it shouldn't have been that way. We should be celebrating Kamala Harris's victory right now, not preparing for the next 4 years. But we have work to do. Like I said earlier, we have to go ahead, figure out what we can do with the House and the Senate. What do you mean I'm wrong badly? How do you figure I'm wrong badly? Joe Biden got 81 million votes in 2020. Kamala Harris is sitting at about 66 million, 67 million. Clearly, the Democrats didn't show up for her. But no, clearly the Democrats did not. Just blocking some people here. Democrats clearly did not show up for Kamala Harris this last time. And with all of the support, all of the fundraising, all of the volunteers, all of the door knocking, I can't explain it other than they chose not to vote for her. I don't know if they got complicit in thinking that she was going to win and it was going to be a cakewalk, so they didn't think they had to, or if they just couldn't bring themselves to vote for her for whatever reason, whether it was because of Joe Biden stepping aside back in July and her becoming the de facto nominee, or whether it was because of any number of figures. But the votes didn't go to Donald Trump, which tells me they didn't vote for her. If you're just joining in, we've been talking about the election and what goes next, and just trying to make sense of how everything happened on election night with the vote count, etc. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of it. Now, Kamala Harris did come out today. She did the right thing, and she conceded the race. She gave a great speech conceding the race and admitted she lost to Donald Trump. And that is something we have yet to get from Donald Trump when he lost to Joe Biden 4 years later. We need to get rid of anyone in current party and start over. I don't know if we have to go that far. We don't have to burn it all to the ground. But we got to figure out where the disconnect was here. And figure out what caused people to stay home. And I don't even know for sure that they stayed home. They just chose to not vote for the presidential race. I have not seen the comparisons between the down ballot races and the presidential race. Normally, if people only fill in one spot, it's usually only for president. But we could be seeing something different where they voted down ballot this time and they didn't vote top of the ticket. The left needs to moderate a little bit. Joe Biden was a moderate. That was his thing. He was more moderate. Kamala Harris shifted a little bit farther left, and she wasn't nearly far enough left. And I don't know if that was also the problem. And I'm just going to tell you right now, don't engage with the trolls. But Joe Biden was more moderate. Kamala Harris moved slightly left, but she didn't go very far left. She wasn't saying anything completely outlandish by the end of her campaign. She wasn't far left. She was not talking about universal health care or universal basic income or any of that. It was just, you know, your freedoms to make your own healthcare decisions, better wages, helping people afford to live in this country, and give everybody a seat at the table and make it fair for everybody. Now, I don't know if that was the issue, if even that was too far left for some Democrats, or if they didn't go far enough left. And that some of these votes were protest votes because her policies were not left enough. Again, I haven't seen the breakdown. I don't know what all of that is going to entail and what that's going to look like. I just know that if you compare the numbers, Donald Trump didn't really gain any support this election. But the Democrats also didn't vote. That's what the numbers are showing to me. Now maybe somebody else has had a better breakdown of it, but now we got to prepare. We got to start looking at the midterms, figuring out what we can do and where. Start working on getting candidates out there, figuring out who's going to be running for where, and preparing to take back power in Congress so we can counterbalance whatever's coming out of the White House here in the last 2 years of the Trump administration. Now, one way or the other, come 2028, Donald Trump will not be running for president. Donald Trump will not be running for president in 2028. Pookie says, yes, Democrats need to regroup. I agree. They do. And I really thought we'd be talking about the Republicans at this point, about them being the ones that needed to regroup, get their base back, figure out how they go from here. But the Republicans aren't in much better shape. 2028, Donald Trump will not be eligible to run again for another term. And they're going to have a candidate. Now, whether that's J.D. Vance, could be. I don't know who they run. That still turns out their base. Because a big chunk of their base will vote for Donald Trump and Donald Trump only. And he will not be eligible. And a lot of people are worried about them doing something to make it so he can run again. That's an uphill battle. They do not have the seats to make that happen. It would take 67 senators and 300 and some members of the House of Representatives to pass it out of both chambers, and then 38 states to pass a constitutional amendment to change the term limits for the president. It's just not going to happen. The math isn't there. Even if they have the Senate by 3-4 votes at this point, that doesn't get them anywhere close to the 67. So I don't see them being able to change the Constitution to allow Donald Trump to run again. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. But Democrats are going to have to regroup and figure out where they went wrong, who they're going to run. I think they need to come up with 2 or 3 good candidates to go into the primary, way ahead of everything, whether that's them sitting down with leadership and having a discussion about who's running, or what. But if they go into the primary, especially starting off with Iowa, New Hampshire with 6-7 people, that's going to be a bad start for the Democrats. They don't need a big contested field. That is part of how we got to where we are right now. We need to do something. And we need to figure out, like I said, where the voters are. Where did those 16 million voters not go? Whether that's, if they have to go back out, start canvassing people door to door, try to figure out who didn't vote, why, or something. I don't know how they get that information, but they got to figure out where did the votes go, because Kamala Harris is about 16 million votes under where Joe Biden did. And, all those people chose not to vote for the presidential race one way or another. They didn't vote for, It's not like the votes shifted to Donald Trump. They're not there. They didn't vote for a third party candidate. They're not there. So where did they go? Why didn't they vote for Kamala Harris? And we got to figure out what that is. Is it in the fact that she's a woman? Is it in the fact that is it just basically in how that she became the nominee? Is it nothing against her personally? And if she were to run again in 2028, would they support her? That's entirely possible. I don't know. I don't know if she would even try to run again. We've got 4 years to figure out who that Democratic candidate is going to be, but whoever it is, they will not be running against Donald Trump. And that will help whoever it is, hopefully, have a better shot. I was really hoping we were out of the era of old white men. But that's who we picked. We've got to survive the next 4 years. We got to lean on hopefully having Democrats with the House, and that the courts hold and prevent a bunch of the very egregious stuff that is in Project 2025. Any of the unconstitutional things that they are talking about, like the mass deportations, that's going to be held up in court cases for a long time. One thing about Trump supporters, they are not very gracious winners. I have seen so many comments by people that have voted that way, and they're not gracious about it. They won, they got their way, and they're just as obnoxious as when they were losing. But anyway, we got a lot of work to do in the midterms. We're going to have to, like I said, figure out how we reclaim power in Congress. It's not going to be over. And, I think Republicans are going to be watching this, and they're going to be very cautious about what kind of stuff they support coming out of Donald Trump. He's not going to entirely get his way. And we're going to see where his priorities lie and go from there. But there's also going to be nobody controlling the reins. I heard something earlier today that he is talking about doing a lot of acting secretaries, things like that, and just bypassing the Senate altogether, not even trying to get his nominees approved through the Senate, a Senate that is in his favor. So are his appointees going to be that bad that he can't get them approved through a favorable Senate? We'll have to see. But yeah, we're just talking about the election results, trying to make sense of any of it. And I've said it numerous times in this live, but the Democrats did not show up for Kamala Harris. That's the gist of it. They did not show up because Donald Trump's support was about the same as it was in 2020. He didn't gain many votes, if any. And Kamala Harris is about 15, 16 million underperforming of where Joe Biden was. So it's not adding up, other than Democrats did not vote for her. And I still don't know where that came from. And then you got places like Florida, where 57% of Floridians voted to protect the right to choose with the abortion measure. Now, it needed 60% to pass. It didn't get to that threshold. But 57% voted for the abortion measure. And then voted for the person that caused them to need that abortion measure in Donald Trump. I don't understand how that math works either. How they would vote for the abortion measure at the bottom of the ticket and not vote for Kamala Harris, who wanted to protect abortion rights at president. Same in Missouri. I had high hopes for Missouri. I thought Missouri was going to have a chance and be at least competitive, and it wasn't. But I asked all the time, I'm like, how is it that you can vote for the abortion measure at the bottom of the ticket and then not vote for Kamala Harris at the top? And apparently you can. I don't know how that makes any sense, but it happened. I have not heard what happened with the abortion measure in Nebraska. I haven't seen which way that race went. They had both measures on the ballot, one in favor of a ban, one in favor of abortion protections, and I have not seen the results of either of those. So I thought that was interesting to at least see how that race fared, but I have not seen what those results are looking like. But just trying to talk through it all, because my brain has been going nonstop since I got up this morning, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out how this went and why the election went the way it did. And it doesn't make any sense. I fully expected Kamala Harris to win by 10 to 15 million votes, and she ends up losing by, 4 or 5 million. But she underperformed Joe Biden by a significant margin, by about, what was it be, 16, 17% of what Joe Biden got, something like that off the top of my head. And if they would have all shown up and voted for her like they did for Joe Biden, she would have won. And those votes that didn't materialize for her this time are people who voted for her to be vice president last time. So I still don't know where that disconnect is. Why they were not willing to vote for her at the top of the ticket, but they voted for her as vice president. I don't know. This was one of the best ran races by Kamala Harris that I have ever seen. She had record-breaking fundraising. She drew numbers that nobody has ever set in a ridiculously short amount of time. She had only entered the race in the middle of July, and then she ended up she did end up losing. She did lose. And that's true. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. And part of her moving to the right on the issues is she was trying to find that middle ground between being too far left that she wouldn't get the Never Trump Republicans and alienating voters. And I don't know if it's that people don't like her. Because I really don't. I don't know if it's that people don't like her or if they were protesting how she became the nominee, if they were protesting something else. But Democrats did not turn out for her in the numbers that they have proven they could. Democrats have proven they can turn out between 81 and 82 million voters. Now, Hunter, as far as her not being likable, I would say if we were talking about Hillary Clinton, I would agree with you. Kamala seems very likable. She seems down to earth. She's definitely middle class. And I don't know, she seems human, but I don't know if that was what people didn't like. But she seemed genuine and fun. But for whatever reason, Democrats did not turn out. They did not show up in the numbers that they have proven they can turn out. They did. They had 81 million voters, 81 point something million voters in 2020, and she's sitting at like 66 million, 67 million. Lisa says, didn't care for her, but I wasn't going to vote for Trump. Exactly. My parents, which are hardcore conservatives, couldn't stand Donald Trump. And at least as far as what they were saying, because I didn't watch them vote, obviously. That's, if they lied to me, they lied to me. But they said they were going to vote for Kamala Harris because they could not stand Donald Trump. And they voted for him twice before. I just don't know where all the support went. Democrats proved they could turn out 81 million voters to vote for Joe Biden. And those numbers didn't materialize. Like, it wasn't like they said the missing 14 million or 15 million voters. It's not like they voted for Donald Trump. They didn't. Those votes didn't turn up. They didn't turn into, they didn't vote down ballot. And that's where I'm very confused. That's what I don't understand. They just chose not to vote for the President of the United States. They just didn't fill in that blank on their ballot. And the number of people who came out and said they were voting for the first time. So we had record new voters, new registrations. And I don't know what the number is on how many of those new registrations actually turned into voters. But I'm thinking a lot of people came out, registered, and never voted. That is also entirely possible. So we got a lot of work. The Democrats have a lot of work to do. They've got to prepare and get around through to the midterms. We got to get to the midterms, and we have to flip Congress in the midterms. Now, there are going to be midterm elections. As a different creator on here said earlier in a video I was watching, that Donald Trump is egotistical enough to believe they will gain seats in the midterms. He's egotistical enough to say that people love him enough that they would gain more power, that they will have midterm elections, and then we just have to prove him wrong. Can't run. You say, Paik Chris says, I can't run a woman for president anymore, unfortunately. I don't know if that's true, because I don't know where these voters came from or why they didn't come out. I don't know if it was because she was a woman or if it was because of something else. Was it because of how she became the nominee? Were they protesting in favor of Joe Biden, being pushed aside and saying, well, we didn't want, like how they pushed Joe out of the race, so we're not going to vote? Or is it because of the Israeli-Palestine war? Or was it because of the Ukraine-Russia war? I don't know why they didn't turn out. I hope it's not. I really do hope that these Democrats that didn't turn out, that it was a reason other than the fact she was a woman. But the Democrats have regrouping to do. They have to already start looking ahead to 2026 and 2028, getting ready for the midterms and getting a candidate or two ready to run in the primaries going into 28. Some people have floated out back when we were talking about Joe Biden stepping out, Gavin Newsom. That's entirely possible. Felix says you're heartbroken. A lot of us are. I slept horrible. I don't think we're doomed, though. We are not doomed. We have to hope that the safeguards will hold. I think it's possible we get the House. Or if we don't and they have the House, they're going to be staring at a margin much like what they currently have. 4 seats, 5 seats. Hakeem could be a good president. We'll have to see. I think he's articulate enough to make a good candidate. But I think if the Republicans keep the House, it's not going to be by a large margin, and they are going to be fighting amongst themselves, trying to figure out where how much they can get passed. They are not going to get a lot through the House. Hakeem Jeffries running for president could be a good candidate. You got Gavin Newsom. You got Amy Klobuchar is an up and coming one. You got Pete Buttigieg. You got a lot of people. There are a lot of people deep in the Democratic bench who could run and make good candidates, and they have a lot of younger talent in the Democratic Party. Now, what you're going to run into with the Republicans is who runs on the Republican side in 2028. Looking ahead, Donald Trump is going to be term limited out. He will not be able to run, and there is no way, with the margins that they are looking at in the House and the Senate, that they can get a constitutional amendment passed in time for 2028. It just can't happen. So he's not going to be eligible to run. He's not going to be eligible to run. And if whether or not he leaves, there's going to be an election regardless of what he tries to do. And that's if he's even president by 2028. There's some people speculating that J.D. Vance could end up having to use the 25th Amendment to replace him somewhere between here and there, and that could happen. And Donald Trump is 78 years old. He is not a young person. We never know what could happen in 4 years with somebody who is in their late 70s. It is the same question we had about Joe Biden going in, right after he won in 2020. Is we were wondering whether or not he was going to be able to make it all 4 years. So there will be an election in 2028, and Republicans are going to have a candidate, but they do not have a very deep bench. I don't know if they try to run Don Jr. or something like that, but they don't have anybody. There is a good significant number of the Republican Party who will not vote for anybody who is not Donald Trump. And when they are struggling to find the replacement to Donald Trump, Democrats need to be prepared with one or two candidates to primary and not have a major field. Pake Chris says, is Mike okay? Mike who? Are you talking about the Rational Boomer? But the Republicans don't have nearly that deep of a bench. Oh, Mike, he did a video earlier. He's fine. He's pissed and irritated, but he's fine. I've been talking with him back and forth a little bit. And I don't know if it's going to work out for tonight, but I plan to try to get back on the podcast here soon. Just trying to vent a little bit as I'm trying to, that's part of why I did this live. I'm just still trying to make sense of everything that happened with this election. And what a better person to vent to than the Rational Boomer. For those of you that might not be aware of the Rational Boomer does a podcast, does one every night. I'm a routine guest over on the podcast, and that's kind of what led me to doing these videos and now live streams, etc. And I plan to be a guest again here shortly, just whatever it works out with me and Mike. But I just hope we don't end up going into 2028 with a situation like we had in 2016. Very wide field, narrows quickly, and then you have a holdout like you did with Bernie Sanders, where Bernie held out to the very, very end, and a lot of people were mad about Bernie Sanders not being the nominee, and they voted against Hillary. Hillary wasn't a very well-liked candidate. If the Democrats had ran anybody other than Hillary Clinton in 2016, I think Donald Trump gets beat in 2016, and we're not having this conversation now. Same thing with the Republicans. Republicans had a field of like 8 people going into the early primaries, and Donald Trump wasn't a serious contender early. But because they had such a wide field, he was getting, a significant number of delegates early because the field was so wide that if it would have been him versus like one or two other people, he probably wouldn't have gotten nearly the support he did, because it only looked like he was building support because they were spread so thin between all of the other delegates. I mean, Democrats are going to be fine coming out of this. We got work to do to get through to the we have got work to do to get through to the midterms. We've got to retake Congress in the midterms. And I believe we can. 2028 is only, or 2026 is only 2 years away. Do I think Trump is going to get sentenced? I don't know. I was 100% convinced that after he lost the election, he would get sentenced to prison. He's going to get a sentence of something. He's not going to get away with no sentence, but it's either going to be, an amount of time on probation or a fine or something. Whether or not he gets prison, if he gets a prison sentence, it will be delayed until after he's no longer president. And no, he can't pardon himself. These are state charges. Presidential pardons do not work for state level charges. Only the governor can deal with those. The rest of the cases are going to stop, though. I read something earlier today that Jack Smith is already looking at being resigned and gone before Election Day. That way, Donald Trump can't fire him, and there won't be any issue there. But those cases are going to stop. Donald Trump got what he wanted. He delayed his cases long enough to re-win the presidency and make them stop. And they're going to go away. He still has the RICO case in Georgia. He does, but they're going to run into a problem, just like New York, where they're going to delay that until after he's president. At this point, if it doesn't get ran and completed before January 20th, which it doesn't look like it will, then they won't put him on trial before January 20th of, what would that be, 2029, when he's no longer president. And looks like just got to deal with one here. No. Yeah, it does seem like he got away with it all. I wasn't expecting this, and it all comes down to the 15 or so million Democrats that did not vote for Kamala Harris this time. And I don't have the state-by-state breakdown as far as how many votes she needed in each state. But it was looking like she was going to win and win big. And Democrats said, we're not voting for her for one reason or another. Because Donald Trump's support is about the same as it was in 2024. Well, I wouldn't say all felons. This felon could win the presidency. Which is very funny coming from the party of law and order. But they don't believe those are real felonies. They don't believe that he even committed those crimes. They think it was all made up stuff because of who he is. His supporters do not believe that those crimes are actual crimes. Because of who it is. Because it's Donald Trump. I have been confused and puzzled all day about everything involving this election. Now, for those of you joining, I am recording this as well. It will be up over on my YouTube page. I am Analytical Iowan over on YouTube as well. There is a link in my bio. That will be going up hopefully sometime tonight. Just depends on how long it takes for YouTube to upload it whenever I wrap this up. But talking about the election, talking about politics, and we've got work to do. And it's going to be shoring up what we can. I'm hoping the Democrats take the House and keep some balance of power. But then we got the midterms. We just got to put the work in for the next 2 years, survive to the midterms, and as much as I guaranteed a win for Kamala Harris and a big win for Democrats in the House and the Senate this time, I'm much more confident about the midterms, because historically the party in power loses seats in Congress in the midterms, especially if things don't go very well, and I'm expecting things to not go very well for the Donald Trump second administration. But we got work to do. I still want to figure out. I've been saying it a lot. I want to figure out where those 15 million votes didn't come from. You know, Joe Biden had 81 million votes and change in 2020. Last time I checked, Kamala Harris is sitting at about 66, 67 million. That's 14, 15 million votes nationwide of people who did not vote for her, but they also did not vote for Donald Trump, because his support is sitting about where it was in 2024. And that's the part that is very confusing. With all the emotion, the energy, the build-up, Kamala Harris ran a flawless campaign. She ran one of the best campaigns I have ever seen, and apparently it was all for naught because the Democrats bailed on her. We lost the blue wall, didn't throw up through the Sun Belt, and I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Everything appeared to be going in her favor, and this is where we end up. Now, Steve Bannon said on the War Room podcast today that Project 2025 would be the agenda. Problem is, a lot of that is going to be required to be pushed through Congress. If Democrats take the House, which still isn't called yet, then, they're going to block a bunch of it. One of the things I'm confused by, and I wish somebody would do the numbers, I have not sat down to look at all the numbers for all the House races and everything, is did more people vote in the House races that did not vote for president? Now in Iowa, everything's all on one page, front and back. So you don't get different ballots for each race or whatever. So I don't know how that works in other states, but they're still counting votes for the House races, and a lot of those are too close to call. So did people not vote for president but vote for their House rep? It's looking that way because of how close this race is. So waiting to see how the House race shakes out. We should probably know in the next few days. Then we got to deal with the counties certifying the votes. Funny how all of the talk of county election workers not certifying the votes has gone away. That's gone. People aren't talking about that. You're not hearing anybody pushing for that now. Donald Trump won. What happened to all the cries about the stolen election and there was going to be so much cheating, etc.? Donald Trump wasn't president. So how did Donald Trump do anything to prevent the cheating? They never proved any cheating, but he was saying for months that that it was going to be, that there was going to be cheating, there was going to be cheating, there was going to be cheating. But yet he won. So, you know, if he supposedly is going to claim that somehow he won despite the cheating or whatever, if we could do it once, why couldn't we do it a second time? I don't believe there was any cheating, but none of it makes sense. Now suddenly he believes it was a free and fair election. So, I don't know. But we got work to do. And we just got to survive. We got to hold on 4 more years. 2 to the midterms, get more seats in the House and the Senate to put a counterbalance to a President Trump. And then from there, we have to have a good candidate going into 2028. A couple things to look for after January 20th. Sometime after January 20th, expect Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito to resign. I fully expect both of them will resign. And we are going to get younger versions of both of them in the Supreme Court. And they are going to be on the court for 30 or 40 years each, whoever those replacements are. Because they are up there in years, they're both, having issues, potentially. I mean, maybe not. Maybe they don't resign now because of, with Donald Trump being in charge of the DOJ, with his hand-picked appointee running the DOJ, maybe there is no investigations into anything that Alito and Thomas have done, and maybe they don't feel the need to retire. But a lot of people are speculating that those two could retire going into a Republican administration, just because that would give a Republican president the chance to end up replacing them and putting on a conservative for 30 or 40 years. So this entirely could happen. And if that does happen, I can think of a couple names that would probably be at the top of the list. One of them being Aileen Cannon. That she could potentially be on the short list to replace Alito or Thomas as Supreme Court Justice, should either one retire during the Trump administration. She's also supposedly on the short list for Attorney General. So we'll see how those things shake out, and how Donald Trump's cabinet is going to shake out. He's not going to put qualified people in places. He's just not. He's going to put people in places around him in his cabinet that are going to be yes men. They are going to give him the answer he wants to hear, and that's that. They are going to give him the they're going to tell him, yeah, you're a genius, Donnie. We should try that, whether it's legal or not. Whereas in his last administration, he had people around him who would stop him. Bofus88 says also all decent Republicans want nothing to do with him. You're absolutely right, because decent Republicans speak out against him, and then he calls them rhinos and gets them kicked out of the party. He's going to give cabinet positions to literally anybody. Anybody who pats him on the ass and tells him he's a genius. I saw something today that Marjorie Taylor Greene wants a cabinet position. She thinks she deserves one before RFK Jr. And I can't believe I'm saying this. This is the second time I think I've ever said it. I agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She deserves a cabinet position before RFK Jr. Because I think she's actually smarter than RFK Jr. I didn't think I'd find anybody, but she's smarter than RFK Jr. It's been a very long day. I've had this election on my mind, most of it, even through my working hours earlier. And I've been just trying to make sense of it. And for those of you joining, that's what we're talking about. We are talking about the election and trying to figure out and make sense of how this turned out the way it did, because the only thing that makes sense is that about 15 million Democrats did not show up to vote for Kamala Harris. And they didn't vote for anybody else because those votes haven't turned up anywhere. They weren't third party votes. They weren't votes that went to Donald Trump because his support is about where it was in 2020. So I don't know. I don't know why they didn't show up. I've said it a lot of times in this live that they just didn't show up. Whether it was a protest vote because of how she got the nomination, what does it say here? Bofus says, "I'm 35 and realize the rest of my life will be watching us try and rebuild after Trump." Yeah, you're probably right. It potentially could take us a generation or two to rebuild. If he gets his way and some of the stuff they want to do that's in Project 2025 happens, it will take us several generations to rebuild from. They are talking about doing away with the Department of Education. DM Elliott. No, I don't bring anybody else in. Just safer that way. I respond to comments in the chat though. Until I get more comfortable doing lives, this is only the third live I've ever done. I just don't like bringing in extra guests and stuff. But what I've been saying, see if you follow my logic here, has been the Democrats that didn't vote for Kamala Harris showed up. They were protesting one of a couple of things. Either they were mad with how she became the nominee. They didn't like that she's a woman. They were protesting because of how Joe Biden got pushed out of the race, or potentially because of like the Israel-Hamas war or the Ukraine-Russia war. And they were all protest votes. But that's like 16-17% of Joe Biden's vote total from 2020 that did not turn out in some kind of a protest. That's possible. Was too much to ask for America to vote for a black woman with 100 days to notice. That could be too. But I really thought with all the momentum she had with the record fundraising, all of the Zoom calls, with all of the just the turnout, the fundraising, she raised $1 billion in just under 3 months. That is insane amount of fundraising. The amount of volunteers and the door knockers and everything they had going. Joe Biden originally was going to be a one-term president, DM Elliott. He said initially when he ran, he was going to be a one-term president. And then about 2 years in, about midterms, Donald Trump announced about 3 days after the midterms, that he announced his candidacy for this race because he thought it was going to keep him out of prison. And apparently he was right. And then when Donald Trump ran again, Joe Biden said, well, I beat him once, I can do it again. And said he was going to stay in and do it because he thought that was best for the country. Now, should he have stepped aside back then and maybe let there be a primary? Sure. But now I'm waiting to see how Alan Lichtman analyzes this. But if you believe Alan Lichtman's keys to the White House, if you have a primary contest, especially a messy primary contest, when you're the party in the White House and you're not the incumbent, you don't win the White House. I think ultimately we would have ended up in the same route. I think what should have happened, maybe I'm wrong, is when Joe Biden stepped aside, he should have resigned then too, and let Kamala Harris take over at that point. Because I think people would have had more confidence in her if she was already doing the job. I mean, that's entirely possible that should have been what he did. It was resign then, and then let her run the country while campaigning. But it wouldn't have freed her up to do all of the events that she did. The only reason she was free to do all of the campaigning she did was because Joe Biden was running the country. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer was there. DM Elliott says people had already decided on Biden and she was his proxy. Would have been better to have Newsom or someone outside of his administration. It's entirely possible. But when we were less than 2 weeks to go to the Democratic National Convention when Joe Biden stepped aside, there wasn't much time to come up with an answer. Democrats should have either at that point said it's too close, let Joe Biden run, and let the chips fall where they may, or, you know, or Joe Biden, I think, should have stepped aside completely and resigned and let Kamala Harris just take over running as president from there. It was too close. And a lot of comparisons were made when he stepped aside to LBJ saying in March of '68 that he wasn't going to run, and all of the negative coming from his administration falling on Hubert Humphrey. And that's kind of what happened here. She got stuck with all the negative from his administration, despite the fact she was trying to walk a very fine line from not talking bad about the sitting president, who was her boss and her running mate, and then still distancing herself enough that people would vote for her. But we're here because Democrats pushed for Joe Biden to step aside because of the bad debate. He had one horrible debate. I still think he could have beaten Donald Trump. I think Joe Biden would have had the numbers he had in 2020. Pretty close. I think he would have at least won. But everybody got scared and went, oh my God, we can't win now, and bolted. And they got terrified and pushed and pushed and pushed until Joe Biden stepped aside. The media didn't help either. They would ask, Joe, you stepping aside? He'd say, nope, I'm running this race. I'm finishing it. Very next day, you'd see 3 headlines. Joe Biden, is he going to step aside or is he going to stay in the race? The media helped push him out too. I have been saying that all day, DM Elliott. I don't know where the 15 million votes went. And the thing is, it would have been frustrating, but acceptable if they would have voted third party. As much as I hate third party votes because they don't do anything. You know, it would have been easier to accept if those 15 million votes would have all backed a third party candidate. Any third party candidate. That would have made so much sense. But instead, they just chose not to vote for the top of the ticket. Hell, they could have even voted for Donald Trump. But they couldn't do that because they couldn't stand Donald Trump for being who he was. So they chose to not vote for either. And then Donald Trump shows up with the same support that he had in 2020, and it didn't change. DM Elliott, it could be. I have been back and forth on that issue all day and a lot of times in the live. I've said, is it because she's a woman? Is it because she's a black woman, an East Asian woman? But how could 15 million people be willing to vote in 2020 for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when she was on the ticket and then not come out and vote for her again in 2024, other than they were protesting something. I don't know what they were protesting. That's the only thing I can think of. Is that they were protesting one of the wars? Were they protesting how Joe got kicked out of the race? How this whole thing happened? Or was it something else? Was it because of the the economy is doing great right now, despite what people think. DMLE says, yeah, it's wild. It will take us a while to figure out what went wrong. We may never know. I don't know how we come up with this information. All we can do is regroup, go from there, and try again. In 2 years, we'll have midterms. We are going to have to do everything we can to, retake Congress in the midterms. We're also going to have to watch for any special elections that pop up. Do our best to win any special elections. Because you never know who's going to end up having what happen to them. Marjorie Taylor Greene may get appointed to a cabinet position, and then her seat becomes open. I don't know if Georgia has a special election for House seats or if it would be an appointment by the governor. Every state's different. GML8 says it would be great if we had leaders who didn't qualify for Medicare. Yeah, I agree. I thought we were past the era of the old white man. To put it in perspective, when I was not eligible to vote because I was not old enough in Bush v. Gore. But at the time, right around the time I turned 18, we had President Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is younger than Donald Trump. He was president 20 plus years ago. That is insane that we are dealing with people as old now as were president 20 years ago. We were heading in the right direction, and then we had the audacity to elect Barack Obama. We elected Barack Obama not once, but twice. And then we get Donald Trump. And I've been saying since Donald Trump won in 2016, if the Democrats ran anybody other than Hillary, that whoever it was would have won. Anybody but Hillary. She was an unlikable candidate. She was the epitome of the establishment Democrat. And she did not run nearly as good of a campaign as what Kamala Harris just ran. And she campaigned for longer. And she felt forced on us because there was a big push for Bernie Sanders. And Bernie got pushed to the side. And there was a big protest vote then too because of Bernie Sanders. There was a bunch of people that would have voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary or did, and turned around and voted for Donald Trump in the 2016 election. What if Obama had waited and let Hillary run and win in 08, then he could have run in 16? I don't remember if Hillary was in... Was she in the running for 08? I don't remember if she was in the primary or not. Entirely possible. I don't know if Hillary would have won. I really don't. Going up against, what was it? Was that McCain? Was it McCain in 08? Or was it Romney in 08, McCain in 12? I get those two backward. I think she would have had a tough time if it was McCain. If she was running against McCain, I think she would have had a very tough time against McCain. She would have really struggled. Yeah, I think Hillary would have struggled against McCain. I think part of the reason Obama did so well in '08 is he was such a drastic change from Bush. Bush was horrible. Things were going bad. We were just starting to get into the housing crisis of '08, where the housing market just completely collapsed because of the mortgage issues that were going on at the time, where people were able to very easily go online and get super cheap subprime mortgages, and it collapsed the housing market. Obama being anti-Iraq and Hillary voted for the war as a senator. Yeah, that didn't help her either. Her being pro-Iraq war did not help her in 2016, and I think it would have hurt her in '08. Obama was the voice of change. He was the new guy, the up and comer. He was the face of hope, and he was the anti George W. Bush at the time. Obama was running when he was running against Bush. It was kind of a Donald Trump scenario. He was the outsider. He'd only been in Congress for 2 years. If Hillary would have been running against McCain, I think McCain wins. Just because we were only 8 years out of the Clinton presidency, it wouldn't have worked. There's no way. I think you could not convince me that Hillary would have won in '08. I think McCain wins easily against Hillary. Hillary was just unlikable. Now, there would have been some things that didn't happen if she ran in '08 that they wouldn't have used against her. There wouldn't have had the email scandal. There wouldn't have been Benghazi, things like that. But when you're talking about coming out of Bush, Bush was the second Bush presidency in 3 presidents. You're talking about, you had H.W. Bush for 4 years, you had Clinton for 8, and then 8 years of George W. And you have Obama there in '08 as a counter to establishment policies. He did not seem like an establishment Democrat. He didn't seem like an established politician. And he was talking about change and being the voice of reason. And that's what did him in. Now, this time around, we just don't, everything would have been different then. I just don't think Hillary could have won. I don't think Hillary could have won ever. I really don't. I do not think she had any chance of winning ever. But if the Democrats ran anybody but Hillary Clinton in 2016, I believe they would have beaten Donald Trump and we wouldn't be where we are now. I did a whole video earlier where I was talking about blame. And if the Republicans hadn't gone back after Joe Biden started his term and went down and kissed the ring and brought Donald Trump back into politics, he'd still be enjoying life, retired down at Mar-a-Lago. He wouldn't have been campaigning all summer. Well, maybe he would have been under investigation, but maybe those investigations never took place because, if he was minding his own business and not doing anything and staying out of the public light, maybe they leave him alone. I don't know. I don't want to sound like a Trump supporter saying they only investigated him because he was running. But, who knows how that all plays out differently if the Republicans don't go back down to Mar-a-Lago, kiss the ring, and bring him back into the public spotlight. If they leave him in exile as a pariah, we're not here. We're not talking about him being the president in 2 months, 2.5 months. But for all the people who protested and did not vote for Kamala Harris, we're going to be in for a rough ride the next 4 years. We're going to get through it, We will get through the next 4 years. I have no doubt in my mind about that. We will get through it. We will end up probably having Democrats gaining ground in the House and the Senate in 2 years. And then we will see what happens in the presidential race. But I think Democrats win in 28. I am putting it out there right now. I think Democrats win in 28 because Republicans don't have a deep enough bench, and they have surrounded themselves with people who are only interested in voting for Donald Trump. And he will be ineligible in 28 to run again if he's even capable of being president in 2028. If he hasn't been taken out by the 22nd Amendment, there's some talk about J.D. Vance doing something underhanded like that, or if his health hasn't got him by then. Either way, he can't run in 28. And from there, Democrats will have a deeper bench, because I thought DM Elliott says, all right, brother, I didn't sleep last night, so going to bed. Yeah, go to bed, get some sleep. If you didn't catch the whole live, this will be up over on my YouTube channel, Analytical Iowan, over on YouTube. I am recording it, going to post it up there whenever I decide to end this. I don't know how much later I'm going to go on this. And then if you want to catch the rest of it. But we got to figure out where we lost the votes, where we lost 15 million votes, regroup, get a good candidate to go for 2028. And I don't know who that is right now. Democrats have a bench to pull from. I mean, it could be any of a number of people. You got an entirely different electorate that we are going to be looking at in 4 years. Millennials and Gen Z are going to be the primary voting bloc. The problem is the millennials and Gen Zs, I believe, did not turn up this election to vote for Kamala Harris. And I don't know whether it was protests or what the reason was, but they did not turn up. So now we have to get the work going, and we have to do what we can to survive the next 4 years. We'll make it through, like I said. We'll get there. It's going to be rough, and we will have to see where it all shakes out at. And I believe that with the House, whether or not Democrats take it, the margin's going to be very slim, and they're going to struggle to get anything passed through the House. It is going to be a struggle, just like they are right now, to get stuff out of the House. The filibuster is going to be our friend in the Senate, and then we have to hope and pray that the courts hold and do their job, because Donald Trump is going to come into the presidency with the fewest number of judicial appointments ever that are going to be open at the beginning of his term. Joe Biden has done such a great job of filling these seats that there aren't going to be a lot of positions in the judge spots for Donald Trump to appoint new judges unless Congress passes something expanding the courts and making there be more judges. So now we just have to hope that these judges do the right thing, they follow the law, and we can get through this next 4 years. It has been a very long, very tiring day. I am mentally exhausted. I'm sure a lot of you are. We have been talking about the election, trying to analyze it, looking at it. And I said it in a video I did earlier. I was wrong. I fully expected Kamala Harris to win this election by 10 to 15 million votes, and that she was going to win with a bigger electoral college margin than what Joe Biden had. And at minimum, we have about 14 to 15 million voters who chose not to vote for anybody in the presidential race. Now, I don't know if they voted down ballot. I have not looked at those numbers yet. They are still counting all the down ballot races. So there's a lot going on there. But I never expected any of this. I was wrong. And I'm willing to admit that I was wrong in my prediction. I was confident enough in how it was going to go, but you know, we ended up just not making it, and we should have. The Democrats failed, and they let Kamala Harris down. So, for those of you joining, we are talking about the election, trying to analyze a little bit of how things went the way they did. Asgard SG1, like the name. We are talking politics, talking the election, looking a little bit as to why things are going the way they are. Have I talked to Mike since yesterday? If you're talking about the Rational Boomer, yes. He's got some content up. We're both just as confused as, can be. This shouldn't have happened. We have 14, 15 million voters who did not vote for Kamala Harris. Now, I do not know if they just skipped voting altogether or if they only voted down ballot, but they did not vote for Kamala Harris based on the numbers of what Joe Biden put up in 2020. And if they would have shown up, we'd be having a very different conversation. As far as the Rational Boomer, I have been talking to him. I don't know if it's going to happen tonight yet. He hasn't got back to me. And at some point, though, soon, I plan to be back on the podcast. Chill at the 15 million. Once all the votes are counted, they'll be close to 2020 turnout. If it's close to the 2020 turnout, then Kamala Harris wins. That's what I'm saying. If the votes are counted, and the reason they're calling the races is they're looking at it going, we've hit a point when there's not many more votes to count, or, as somebody else explained it, when they start looking at, even if one candidate or the other gets 80% of the outstanding vote, they can't win mathematically. It's, that's why they call these races. Well, and that's why I don't like you have to look at state by state races. You can't look, if you break it down county by county, I know it all adds, but sometimes you can get lost in the details. That's what I was watching part of the CNN live event as they were doing the live coverage as it came in, and they kept breaking down, well, this county she's up, but this county she's down, and you got lost too much in the minutia. I'm looking at just popular vote total. She's sitting at about 66, 67 million total votes at this rate, at this point right now. Joe Biden won 2020 with 81 million. That's 14 to 15 million votes. That's where I'm getting that number. I'm not saying that there's that many left to count or whatever. I'm looking at the voter turnout from 2020, where Joe Biden was, and to where Kamala Harris is. Donald Trump got about 74 million in 2020. He's at about 74 million right now. He's about even. That's why I say it was 15 million votes. For those of you just joining, you believe those 25 million are missing for Kamala? So are you saying there's votes out there that haven't been counted that should have been counted for Kamala? Is that what you're saying, Asgard SG1? Because what I'm saying is they just didn't vote. That they just chose not to vote for one reason or another. Yeah. I would agree, Asgard. Um, I don't. I just don't know where the votes are. I don't think they're going to shake out for Donald Trump. They're not shaking out for down ballot for third party. So let's see what the final tally is when they finally count all the votes. Um, but none of this makes any sense to me. Not when she had, record breaking fundraising, record amounts of support and volunteers, and she had the better ground game and everything. No, I can't make it make sense because all of the data I am looking at says she should have won this race. All of the data I'm looking at says she should have won. With the fundraising and just all of the support. But the vote total data is saying she lost. Something there doesn't add up to me. And now we have to do what we have to do. We got to start looking forward to the midterm, doing what we can to reclaim power in Congress, as many seats as we can. I think while we haven't found out about the House yet, the House is going to be very close. And it's going to be, only by a few seats. They are not going to have a big margin in the U.S. House of Representatives if they have power in the House. It's going to be a few seats either way. So between the House and the filibuster, Donald Trump isn't going to be able to get nearly as much done as he may want to. And then from there, we have to regain seats in the midterm and then focus on 2028, figuring out who the new shining star is going to be for the Democratic Party. We've got a deep bench. We just got to figure out who is going to not only turn out the vote ahead of time with, rally attendance and donations and support like that, but who is going to get people to show up at the polls. And I don't know why the Democrats didn't support Kamala Harris this time, but they didn't. I don't know if it's a protest because they were mad about how Joe Biden got pushed out of the race. I don't know if it was protesting because they didn't like how she was made the nominee because she got endorsed by Joe Biden. Don't understand how states with abortion right props could also go for Trump. I said that too. I've said that a couple times during this live stream. Look at Florida. 57% of the vote went to support the abortion amendment. Now it didn't pass because it needed 60%. Because of course, a couple of years ago, Republicans gamed the system and put that on the ballot that they had to pass it with 60%, and that passed with 57% of the vote in Florida. But 57% of the people in Florida voted to protect a woman's right to an abortion. But then about 56% of Florida voted for Donald Trump. The person that caused them to need to have that amendment even be put on the ballot because he installed 3 of the justices that ended up overturning Roe v. Wade. And they were put on specifically to overturn Roe v. Wade. He takes credit for overturning Roe v. Wade. That doesn't make sense. Same with Missouri. They voted in Missouri to protect a right to an abortion and then vote for Donald Trump. I was convinced Florida, Missouri, Iowa, Texas, maybe Ohio, Arkansas, Tennessee could have all been in play for varying reasons. None of them were. And it doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm going to be trying to figure it out for a while, but I don't think I'm going to be able to figure it out. Did people really buy into his give it back to the states BS on abortion? I don't think so. I don't think they did. Because his support is about where it was in 2020. He didn't gain support. He really didn't lose that much support. His vote total is about where he was in 2020. So I don't think they bought into that BS. And we're seeing the results of it being given back to the states. it's not working letting the states control it. And the states that do end up having it up for, an abortion amendment, guess what? It passes. So clearly the people of those states want abortion protections. But they couldn't come out and vote for Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket to make sure those protections are spread nationwide. So I'm probably only going to go a couple more minutes here. Um, just want to say to everybody who did jump in, especially those that jumped in late, I am recording this. The whole live has been recorded. It will be up later tonight on my YouTube page, Analytical Iowan, over on YouTube. I have been going for a little over an hour and a half, hour 45, something like that. So whenever it gets put up over there, however long it takes YouTube to load, I plan to do more of these lives. This is only the third one I've ever done, so I plan to do more. I enjoy doing them. I enjoy discussing politics. I've always been fascinated by it, and I try to analyze things as I look at it. So we've got a lot going. Democrats did not turn up for Kamala Harris like they should have, but now we got to get to work. We got to hope we hold the House, flip the Senate, or hold the House and then get into the midterms to flip the Senate back. And I think it's entirely possible in the midterms. And for those people worried about whether or not there's going to be a vote in the midterms, there will be a vote. Donald Trump's not going to be able to just not hold one. It's in the Constitution that there will, when these things happen, and they will not be able to pass any sort of constitutional amendments in the amount of time they have with the majorities they have. It's just not going to happen. So let's not worry about that. We'll see what happens as it goes forward, but I'm trying not to panic because a lot of what the most extreme stuff they need to do, they are not going to have the margins to get done. So for those of you that did join, I appreciate you guys joining and taking the time to listen to me. Like I said, this will be up over on my YouTube page if you missed part of the earlier discussion. Analytical Iowan over on YouTube, and I plan to do more of these in the future. And I will catch you next time. So, just got done wrapping up my live over there. I'm going to get this put up on YouTube. Had a great conversation. Like I said it numerous times on this thing, we got a lot of work to do. We will be okay. And we will just have to survive. So, thanks everybody.